Imagine knowing your enemy so intimately that you can walk through their camp of 150,000 soldiers, speaking their language perfectly, memorizing every detail, then returning at midnight with 7,000 cavalry to slaughter 15,000 while they sleep. June 1462. Vlad III of Wallachia, the man history would call the Impaler, faced Sultan Mehmed II, who had conquered Constantinople 9 years earlier with the world's most feared army. The mathematical impossibility was staggering. 30,000 Wallachian farmers and minor nobles versus 150,000 Ottoman warriors with 120 massive siege cannons. Every military calculation predicted Wallachia's annihilation within weeks. But here's what makes this battle truly insane. Vlad had spent 4 years as an Ottoman hostage from age 11 to 15, forced to live in Mehmed's court as insurance for his father's loyalty. While other hostages tried to charm their captors, Vlad watched and memorized everything: guard rotations, military protocols, camp passwords, Ottoman psychology. 20 years later, that hostage education would save his kingdom through the most audacious night attack in medieval warfare. Think about the impossible odds. 7,000 horsemen charging into a camp of 150,000 enemies in absolute darkness, using perfect Ottoman Turkish to create chaos, making the Ottomans kill each other while searching for invisible enemies. But the night attack was just preparation for the real weapon, the forest of the impaled. 20,000 corpses on stakes, arranged in geometric perfection that would break even the conqueror of Constantinople's iron will. This is how one man's understanding of terror forced history's greatest conqueror to retreat despite overwhelming superiority. The boy who would become Vlad the Impaler spent 4 years in Ottoman captivity from 1448 to 1452, and every moment of powerlessness became fuel for what was coming. From age 11 to 15, he lived in Mehmed's court as a political hostage, while his younger brother, Radu, charmed their captors and eventually converted to Islam. Vlad took a different approach. He watched everything with cold calculation. He memorized guard rotations with mathematical precision. He studied military protocols until he understood Ottoman warfare better than most Turkish generals. He learned perfect Turkish without accent, so fluent that years later he could pass as a native speaker in darkness. Every humiliation, every beating, every moment of forced submission was catalogued and weaponized. 20 years later, that hostage education would prove more valuable than any army. But first came the moment that made war inevitable with brutal finality. In 1459, Ottoman envoys arrived at Târgoviște, demanding 10,000 ducats in tribute and 500 boys for the Janissary Corps, the same system that had nearly broken Vlad. He invited them to feast with seeming hospitality. When they refused to remove their turbans citing religious custom, Vlad smiled with terrible purpose. Then let me help ensure they never fall off. His soldiers nailed the turbans to the envoys' skulls with iron spikes. The screaming lasted hours while Vlad watched. The message was crystal clear and written in blood. Wallachia would bow to no one ever again. What Mehmed didn't understand was that this brutality wasn't random cruelty or madness. Vlad had learned in the Ottoman court that extreme actions created extreme reactions. Fear properly applied could multiply a small force into something that seemed invincible through psychological projection. Sultan Mehmed II wasn't just any conqueror. This was the man who achieved the impossible by taking Constantinople in 1453 after weeks of bombardment. The 1,000-year Byzantine Empire fell to his cannons, and tactical genius, Christian Europe trembled at the name. At 29 years old, he commanded the world's most disciplined army and had never lost a major campaign. To him, Wallachia was an annoying pebble in his shoe, nothing more, a minor principality that would be crushed in days. But that winter of 1461 to 1462, something disturbing began happening along the Ottoman border. Entire patrols disappeared without trace. Border fortresses fell silent. Then came reports that made even seasoned commanders nervous. 23,884 Turks and their sympathizers had been killed in Wallachian raids, not estimated, counted. Vlad kept exact records with bureaucratic precision. Bodies were found everywhere, in their beds, at their posts, in strongholds thought secure. The impaler struck like a ghost, then melted away. Here's where the numbers become staggering and reveal the impossibility. Wallachia was a buffer state between Ottoman expansion and the Kingdom of Hungary. Its entire population barely reached 500,000 souls. The Ottomans controlled territories from Anatolia to the Balkans, commanding millions. In any logical world, this conflict should have lasted days, not months of systematic terror. But Vlad wasn't playing by logical rules. He was writing new ones in Ottoman blood. Rules written in psychological warfare and calculated terror that turned minds into battlefields. He understood something fundamental. Wallachia couldn't win through strength of arms, but through fear, through turning the land itself hostile, through making victory more terrifying than defeat. That was possible if you were willing to become worse than your enemy. When spring came, Mehmed assembled an army unlike anything Wallachia had ever seen, an apocalyptic host that should have guaranteed victory. The Ottoman force that crossed the Danube in May 1462 defied imagination. Conservative estimates place it at 100,000 men. Some sources claim 150,000. Others suggest up to 300,000. What we know with certainty, 120 massive siege cannons rolled north, the same type that shattered Constantinople's legendary walls. The baggage train stretched for miles with siege engines, supply wagons, mobile workshops. This wasn't a raid or punishment expedition. This was total conquest and annihilation. The Janissaries formed the Iron Corps, 20,000 elite infantry taken as children and raised solely for war. They knew no fear and gave no quarter. Backed by Sipahi cavalry, irregular troops, and allied forces, they were unstoppable. Mehmed himself rode at their head with his royal guard, bringing his personal household troops. The conqueror of Constantinople would accept nothing less than complete victory and Vlad's head on a pike. Against this tide, Vlad commanded perhaps 30,000 men total. Local militia, armed with whatever they could find, boyar cavalry from minor nobles fighting for their lands, Hungarian and Moldavian mercenaries paid with promises rather than gold. No cannons, no siege engines, just desperation, local knowledge, and a commander who understood his enemy's psychology better than they understood themselves. But Vlad had learned something crucial during those hostage years. Large armies required massive supply lines stretching for miles. The Ottomans expected to live off conquered land, supplementing their supplies with local resources. So Vlad gave the order that would echo through military history with terrible simplicity: burn everything. Granaries went up in flames. Wells were filled with corpses and human waste. Cattle were driven into mountains or slaughtered and left to rot in the sun. Part 5, 1,467 characters. Every village in the Ottoman path became a ghost town, with doors swinging in the wind. The earth itself turned hostile through systematic devastation. This scorched earth wasn't just tactical, it was psychological warfare. Vlad wanted the Ottomans hungry, thirsty, and increasingly nervous about what kind of enemy would destroy their own land rather than see it conquered. Then came the most diabolical part that revealed Vlad's genius. He had observed Ottoman camp hygiene during his captivity with scientific precision. He knew how disease spread in large armies cramped together. So he sent his own kind of soldiers into the Ottoman ranks, plague carriers. Sick peasants dressed in Ottoman clothing, speaking perfect Turkish, slipped into the massive camp. They shared water sources, food supplies, stories. Within days, dysentery and fever began their invisible assault through the ranks. The mighty Ottoman army was already suffering before the first real battle. But these were hardened veterans who'd campaigned from Belgrade to Baghdad. A little hardship wouldn't stop them. Mehmed pushed harder with forced marches through the devastated landscape. His message was clear: Wallachian resistance would be crushed through sheer momentum. But hidden in darkness, Vlad's scouts watched every movement. Former Ottoman hostages, who spoke perfect Turkish counted tense, noted positions, memorized routines with precision. As Mehmed's massive army crossed the Danube, they entered a landscape transformed into hell itself. Day 1 in Wallachia taught the Ottomans what kind of war this would be. The advanced guard found the first village empty, doors swinging, granaries, blackened shells, well water stinking of death. On the Orthodox church door, a message in Turkish, "Welcome to our land. Leave while you can." By day 3, the pattern held everywhere. Every settlement abandoned, every resource destroyed.